Hi, my name is Cindy Hogan, and I'm an embroidery instructor. Today we're going to discuss how to decorate denim jackets. Denim jackets were very popular in the 80s, but back then to decorate them, we generally just personalized them for ourselves. Today we're going to use simple shapes to decorate our jacket. The first thing that you need to do is measure how much space that you have to work with. So we're going to grab our ruler and measure about the center spot, and that's about 9.5. I measure down the middle, and that's about 13 inches. So now I know what hoop size I can work with. So I could choose my 8 by 12 inch hoop or my 9 by 14 inch hoop. I'm going to use the 9 by 14 inch hoop so I have a little bit of wiggle room. Now the other thing that I've done is I have actually stitched the design that I'm going to use onto a piece of fabric that simulates what I've got here. And I want to just to give me a perspective to whether I think I'm going to like it or not. The other thing that I could have done is to print out a template for myself. That way I can see whether the design is actually going to fit in the space that I want it to work with and whether I like it. So all you have to do is just simply turn the jacket around, fold it in half facing you, and match your seams up. Make sure the jacket's facing outward and then fold it in half again. So now you can feel your seams here on the side. And you can lay this down on the hoop and you can kind of see where the notches are. Smush it down on your water-soluble stabilizer. Open it up and go the other direction there. And then flip it out. Now you've got your jacket hoop. And this project is so easy, it doesn't matter if it's not totally straight because it's circles. They're not going to show up. All right, so now that we've got our jacket hooped, let's go over here to our software to create our project. At the embroidery software, most of us have applique designs or circle designs or squares, something like that. So we're going to add applique designs in my software. And the first shape that pops up is a circle, and by gosh, that's what I want to use today. So I'm in luck. All I have to do is come in here and draw a circle. I want that circle to be about 4.5 inches. It doesn't have to be exact, and if I look down at the bottom, it'll tell me about what it is. We're in metric, so that's about 100 millimeters or a little bit more than that. And I'm going to duplicate it. This particular software has a power copy, so I'm just going to power copy, and I can drag and draw. It's the exact sizes that I want, and play around with it till I get a design that looks like I want it to look. So now, if I select one of these circles, the fun part starts when you change the stitch types. If I come down to my applique type and I change to a motif stitch, there are all kinds of motifs in most people's softwares these days. And you can come and play with them and get some exciting different looks. So I'm going to grab a motif and I'm going to click apply. And I'd probably come and change the color of the outside color, and I would do that for all of the different pieces. There's one other thing that I might do, and that's what I've done in one of my jackets, is to create a raw edge applique. And to do that, I would choose, instead of a motif stitch, I would choose a run stitch and change that to a bean stitch and click apply. And so now that one's going to be a raw edge applique. After I've got all of my circles completed and I've got my design the way that I want it to look, all I have to do is click on my Tools tab and click on my Artwork button, and it turns those circles into artwork just like that. Any circles that I don't want to use as applique, I can select them and delete them. One of the things that you need to know when you're doing digital cutting with artwork is that when you're using applique, you actually want to have those circles be 1 millimeter bigger than they actually are on the software. So if you choose to change the size and just bump them up by 1 millimeter, and click apply, those will be sized. If you're planning on printing them out to scan, I would suggest that you go ahead and change the colors of all of them to black. That way you don't have to mess with your color ink and it doesn't take a whole lot of ink that way. You can use your laser printer that way as well. There are cloud-based computing softwares that you can use to turn this into artwork for a cutting machine. So let's go over to our digital cutting machine. Digital cutting machines will cut out our circles for us so that we don't have to manually do them. I'm going to pick my pattern up. I've already saved it to my USB stick, and we're going to cut out our circles. Now, once I've got it on my screen, I can press my scan button, and it will scan where the circles are, where the pieces of fabric are laying, so that I know exactly where to place my circles. You can use all of your little scraps of fabric this way, and up to the little teeniest tiny one pretty much. You'll notice that I wasn't fussy cutting when I made this, and I didn't know if my circles were going to fit. So one of my pieces of fabric is stiffened with a fabric stabilizer. The others have a double-sided adhesive backing on them. I'm going to manipulate these circles to where I move my raw edge applique one up to the circle, up to the square up here that has the no backing on it, and then the others I'm going to place where I want them to go. Now, once I've got my circles on my screen, I can press OK, and I can press Cut. I've already cut a test so that I know that my fabric blade depth is correct. I'm going to press Start, and my circles are going to be cut out. Digital cutting machines are wonderful in the way that they do cut the bias beautifully. Now, let's go over to our sewing machine. The first thing that we're going to do is our raw edge applique. And the reason I chose to do this is to kind of show you how you might actually be able to put it in here in a different manner. So we're going to press our foot down and press Go. While that's stitching, I'm going to fold my circle in half and then in half again to where I have a quarter of a piece. And I've got a template that I printed out, and you'll notice that I've marked top so that I know where the top of my circle is. So I'm going to take my pen and lay my template over the top of that, kind of slide my hoop out a little bit, and mark a dot. And this is an easy way to do this, just kind of stick a dot right there, a dot on the side. These are wash away or air dry. And then you cap your pen back up. And you're going to take a little dab of glue, just a little dab, you don't need a whole lot of this, and put it right there in the center of that. That'll hold it in place while it's trying to stitch. So I've got my circle down there. I'm going to flip it out over to the opposite side, and you can see that it's about the same distance, and then open it up. Now, I'm going to slide the hoop back in the machine, put the foot back down, and let the embroidery machine start again. The next thing that we're going to do is take our our double-sided adhesive piece, and we're going to actually stitch this down. So I've got an ironing board over here that's going to let me press this in between. The first stitch that's going to stitch for this is the placement stitch, and I really want to be sure that I line this up appropriately. So I'm going to put my foot down again, and I'm going to press the Go button, and it's going to stitch my line. Remember, we talked about that we added 1 millimeter for the stitch to the actual circle so that we would be able to make sure that it stuck to our machine, stuck to our garment in the appropriate place. I got a little fast there on myself. I didn't let it cut. I'm going to take my hoop out. That millimeter that we added into that measurement is going to make sure that that circle covers our stitching so that we don't have to worry about the raw edge coming out and messing up. And so we're just going to kind of tap our iron to this. You don't really want to press it hard. You just want to kind of give it a little tap and then put it back in the sewing machine. And that's going to finish up the stitching for that. Now, with most embroidery appliques, there's 3 pieces to it. You've got your placement stitch, your tack down stitch, and your covering stitch. When you've ironed on your applique, you don't actually need to do that second stitch. So I'm going to fast forward through that stitch on my embroidery machine. If I press the plus button, I can actually fast forward through one color, and that takes us to our satin stitch. This really is important when you're doing decorative stitching, because you don't want that placement stitch, the tack down stitch, to actually show through your covering stitch. So we're going to press our foot down and let that finish embroidering. And go back over here, since our appliques have finished cutting, let's go look at these appliques. So I'm going to eject my mat, and let's see what we've got. So this is my raw edge applique, and I'm going to peel the fabric away from the outside edge, and see how cleanly that cut? We're going to take our spatula and lift up from the edge. The reason we used that spray stabilizer on this is to try to keep that fray factor down. But with raw edge, you're actually wanting that to turn into more fray as it wears. So then we're going to take the other two pieces. These actually have fabric on the opposite side that you can see. And we're going to peel those off the top. And these are the ones that would adhere to your fabric with the adhesive stabilizer on the back. And they've all cut so beautifully. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is when you're pulling them off of these super tacky mats is that you try not to stretch them. So if you'll come and pick them up with that little spatula, you can get those off very nicely. Now, I've talked about circles mostly today, and one of the reasons I did that is because you have to cut around the bias edges on circles. You don't have to do this with circles. You can pick any shape. Over here, I've got my circles done with a more modern tone as far as the fabric goes. I've used very fresh and powerful colors. But if you're not into that kind of a look, you can come over here and you can pick up a more tonal look by just using a colored jacket and using tonal fabrics to work with it. And if circles don't fit your needs, you can come over here and grab squares and rectangles. Really, it's your project, you're the designer, and nobody will know the difference. It is so easy to do these, and I encourage you to play with those shapes.